afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my presentation. Before I start looking at the slides, I just want to introduce myself a little bit to you. My research is about creating particular classroom culture to promote student collaboration, and I've been doing that for 36 years. And when I first started off, I was very lucky in my pre-service years to work with disaffected children and children that had learning problems. I did that outside getting my degree. So from those experiences, I developed very strong motivation myself to really make sure that I could create a classroom culture where everybody felt involved and participated. I wanted my students to feel that they belonged and develop a classroom community where they're safe to express their views, share their work with each other, and also be part of the decision-making process in not only the learning but how we lay the classroom out and things that do make up the culture that you create in a classroom. So I was always looking for tools that would help me as a classroom teacher to create these conditions, and there wasn't a lot of training around when I graduated in 1980, and so I just made it up as I went along. But I was very fortunate in 2004 to access training from two trainers in America that came to Western Australia. Not many trainers come that far to our side of the world, and they provided training in this sort of creating these sorts of conditions. So I added more tools to my box, and part of the reason that I'm here is that as a classroom teacher, I'm a generalist, and I have done a PhD by publication, and I heard people talking about the struggles of publication and so on. In my case, it makes no difference to my education department whether I do a degree, further degrees or not, and the publications make no difference to my career or my status in my job. So my motivation for doing these publications that I'm going to talk very briefly about were to tell the stories of real children, and I tried to pick examples of diverse types of problems that everyday teachers face in their classroom, because I wanted the articles not only to be theoretical, but to have some practical application. And the other thing that I've been very fortunate to do is I've mentored many teachers over the years. I never say no to a training teacher. I love having them in the room because it's somebody else for me to collaborate with, and also to bounce ideas off, and I get as much from them as I give them. I've written this down because I go on, and I don't want to. I know I'm on a limited time. So one of the things I've learned so much this week, I'm absolutely overwhelmed. But what I know is a social environment which is part of the wider culture of the school and community can be a positive source of development when students are given opportunities to work together, but also work together on things that matter to them, which has been a common theme of many of your presentations I felt over the last few days. Not only are the benefits for their motivation and learning, which I've written about in my PhD, so my PhD is about motivation, but it also creates an exciting learning environment for me, and it creates excitement for the children because every day is different, and even though I've got a set of tools that I draw on, every year when I get a class it's a completely different experience because every child brings with it different history and different needs. I mean, of course, there's similarities. So I've got slides about my PhD, but to me that's a fait accompli. It's my zone of actual development. I finished doing the research a few years ago, and I got my PhD in 2013. And since then, my ideas have moved on because a PhD to me, just like a master's, is just all part of your learning journey in your life or your chosen career. So I think it's moved on a bit. And after listening to all your presentations on these experts around me, I realise I've got an awful lot of reading to do to catch up on this aspect of my own development about theory, because in my focus was on motivation, because motivation is very central to what I do. But I can see that Vygotsky's work, as I said before, really fits in with authentic classroom research. And I feel part of my vision is to try and help other teachers not only see the practical things that I do, but the reasons behind them, because the reasons behind them give me the motivation to do them. And I know a lot of people, well, not a lot, but people do think, some people think like that. So what I'm going to do is race through the PhD slides, and then I'm going to ask you to answer a few questions for me in small groups, if you don't mind, in a moment. And then I'll bring you back together. So I've got about 5 minutes. Could I ask you to get me a drink of water, please? Just outside the door. I'm like this time. Water? Please, here, just outside the door. I don't think I should have gone bowling last night. Didn't get to bed till very late. And as I've been telling Nikolai, every night I've been thinking, waking up at 5 in the morning and I can't go back to sleep. So that's why I've had to write. I don't usually read from notes, I can usually just go off, but you're also special. You're getting what I can give you. So that's my title, and you all have time to read it now. So, motivation is negotiated participation in collaborative community practice. What do I mean by that? Thank you. If you really want to know what I mean by that, you can read my thesis. It's online. It's free of charge. And as I say, I don't get any recognition I don't have to be, I'm not like you guys under pressure having to get publications. I do all this for fun. But basically it's about creating spaces in the classroom where children are able to negotiate, and collaboration is the best way to do that. And that's where I see my links with Vygotsky and community of practice too. So this is very briefly what I'm going to say to you, and I'm only going to talk in detail to a couple of slides because you need background to know why I'm getting to where I'm going to get in 2 minutes, I hope. So I'm going to give you a timeline of the projects, because one of the reasons I put in my application was I got heaps of data about children from different projects I've been involved, but I've been so busy as a classroom teacher because I teach full-time as well as do research, as well as publishing, that I'm taking time off just to reflect on all of it, and this is where I think this conference is going to be a great help to me. So I'm only going to give you snippets of it because it's all online, and just to give you a feel for it. And I'm not going to go heavily into theory because my theories are not as well developed as yours, but I'll tell you what I've used. So have you all read that? Okay, so these are basically some of the projects that apply to this the writing I've done here. In School 1 in 2004, I had a year 4-5 class, and the work I did with them became a master's thesis. And these were very disaffected children, and I've told in detail in the thesis what's happened, but basically you need to know because it reinforces what I said at the beginning. A lot of these children had huge social and emotional problems. They had dysfunctional families, and they've been put in my class because I solve these sorts of problems, but they put 15 out of the 32, 33 in one classroom, and I don't know whether you can imagine what that's like, but I had established bullying going on, and I also had children that had learned helplessness and wouldn't participate in the class no matter what you did, and they just weren't ready to learn anything. And my philosophy is also that children won't listen to you, and they don't care what you have to teach them unless you connect with them. So I had to think on my feet, because I didn't get the training until the end of the year of doing this research, what was going to work with these children. So I sat down with them at the beginning of the year and I asked them what sort of a classroom they'd like to create. We do have choices about our behaviour and what we do. So out of that, 3 main themes emerged, but there's a lot of other things that went on too. And the one I want to talk about is student leadership, because that became the catalyst for children to change their behaviour. So you've got kids that have been together since kindy, don't know much about each other, and the social practices I'll show you in a minute are how I managed to build that social knowledge so that they had some common ground that they could start to build relationships, because relationships, as you all know, are the foundation of a great collaborative classroom. So student leadership, I applied for some funding from Murdoch, and because I'm a full-time classroom teacher, my supervisor came in as a co-researcher, and she did the parent interviews for me once a term, the student interviews for me once a term. She filmed my social practices once a week, so we've got all that video data. And when I came to do my PhD, I could reflect on two very different schools, and I picked focal groups of students, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute. So my data that I'm talking about today only goes up to the 2007, but in 2008 I also took focus groups of children and interviewed them, and I taught their teachers some of the strategies, because the kids went into these classes saying, why don't you do this, this and this? And some of them really miss not having a voice in the classroom. Most of the schools I've worked at are very traditional, and the way I do things is not privileged. So, you're up against it sort of thing. And then that led on to a mentoring teachers project with 3 teachers, and those teachers then I took to a national project that I did on values education. And that's the name of their national project, but I worked across 3 schools with a few 250 children and 7 teachers to really implement these social practices. So they were my PhD research aims, to examine changes in students' participation over a school year and how the social and cultural classroom practices support student motivation. I know they're really, really broad, but you'll see why I have them that way. And I won't go through the theory, but the main thing you need to know is that the zone of proximal development and scaffolding are very embedded in all the writing that I've done. So they were all basically qualitative research projects, but also I combined action research to systematise the way I collected data, because I had to teach the children, the curriculum and everything else, and but I really wanted to also use every learning opportunity in my week, my timetable, to teach them these other things that I thought were very important for them to learn about. So there are some of the things, observations I talked about in the videos. The other important aspect of this research was the sociometric data that I collected. Children were given a choice of where they sat in the classroom, who they sat next to, but the big thing that happened in all the projects was I established social groups based on their social emotional needs, but children had choice in who they wanted in their group, and I always gave them one of their choices, and sometimes they got more than that. So there's heaps of things that I can't tell you about because I don't have time, but basically it was all about helping the children to build positive relationships, to work with each other, and these were some of the things that I used. And I've acknowledged Professor Judy McCallum, who was my co-researcher for the 2007 project. And we presented together and written papers together too. So going back to the schools now. The first school was a low socioeconomic environment, so very similar to the groups of kids that I had in the 3 or 4 years I was doing my teacher training. And the school priority was values education to try and eliminate bullying. But what I've known for a long time is that it's about the classroom culture you create, and we had lots of people coming in doing programs and doing things to kids, but then they'd be taken out of the classroom, then they come back into their peer group and they hadn't practiced any of those things, and they still didn't know their peer group very well. So the programs had very limited success, and the really severe problems, they really needed a lot more support from the peers in their classroom, so that's the approach I took. The second school that I went to, because I was out of school about 10 years, then I moved to this other school and I'm at now, and I've been there 12 years. But that was in a completely different sort of school. It was what we call a leafy green school. The parents were professionals, a lot of them had very, very good jobs, double incomes, and the school priority was higher order thinking skills. But I applied exactly the same social practices in both contexts because the children needed to develop opportunities to contribute to their learning. And these children were expecting everything to be given to them, the answers. This sort of the method we looked at previously from the, at school, that wouldn't have worked with these children because they've never been trained in that way, and I think those sort of things have to start young. So I'm going to use the photographs to quickly explain just a few of the social practices to give you a feel for what went on. So this is my 2007 class in the first week, and I'm setting the social circle, and here we're talking about what sort of a classroom we'd like to have this year. And you can see in the background there, there's a good leader, because remember leadership, my project was student leadership in the primary classroom. So I deconstruct everything with the kids, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. So it's in their language, we develop shared understandings about what they're doing. And so everything's really, really explicit. And then that means I can refer back to it, and so can the children. And the other thing that I do every single day for many years is I pass around a toy or an item, something. I ask the children every day how their name, how they're feeling, and I change it a little bit, but that's basically what we do. And I do that to build a community and to show children generally that I want to connect with them, and I tell them a little bit about my life, they tell me a little bit, I don't know everything that's going on, and so this social knowledge is very valuable for the other children in trying to develop positive relationships with each other and trust. So I'm just going to quickly show you class meetings. At the beginning, this is the very first one at the beginning of the year, so I'm training the children, and I'm a guide on the side. I want them to do it. They put their issues up on a whiteboard. I've got an interactive whiteboard now. And they prioritise what they want to talk about, and then they have 20 minutes to half an hour. We all decide when we've had enough. And they set some goals for that week, and then they reflect the next week. And they use reflection logs to reflect on what responsibility they're going to take for making their groups work and for making things work out in the playground. And initially, the things they put up on the board, which I'd love to talk about, are social and emotional things, but then it comes onto the learning environment, and you know, can we try some groups over here and lines over here. Some of us like to work alone, and you know, a whole heap of other things happens. As the year progressed, children started standing up in pairs as opposed to on their own, and it increased the participation of the students. And what I found happened, you see that girl was in the very first class meeting, and she became, and lots of them did this with each other, they became support for each other, and they both shared the talking. And then this is the last classroom meeting, and I'm right over to the side, I'm not participating. I asked who wanted to run the meetings, and the children decided the two that didn't have an item on the board, they could run the meeting. And these are very interesting kids. I'd love to talk about that part, that'd be good. And student items over as well. I just stuck this in as a bit of data just to show you the patterns and how things change. This is only one piece of the data. The items that they wrote on the board, how many were individual and in the purple, and then how many became shared items with 2 or 3 children standing up. And so there's just a few findings there, but most probably in this context I can skip them because I can't go into great depth about them. The next one, I want you just to read those, because I think students' voices are really, really important when you're doing research. It's not about what the parents think, I think. It's about really what the children think about what's going on in the room, and that's where you get the clues for scaffolding the children. And this was just an example that goes with the other graph about the sort of roles that they tried as leaders in their groups, and then what they wanted to have a go at that they hadn't tried. So they're willing to take risks, and you know, students' perspectives and possibilities for change. That was one of the things I wrote about, talking about things that we need to get better at. We can discuss things and help people to change what's happening at lunchtime in our classrooms. We can agree and disagree and listen to people, sort out, sort of like a sit down, learn to be nice and respectful. When we have problems to sort out, class goals, people not feeling good, and put them up means that they support them. That's what that child meant. And I like debating, even if I don't win. So they learn to agree in an agreeable way and disagree in an agreeable way, which are really important life skills. I think some of you are familiar with Rogoff's analytical planes, and I used her planes to organise my data because I had heaps of qualitative data, and I needed to find patterns and themes that I could use for my papers, and I'll go through them. So I'm not going to go through her in great depth, but basically that's what I used her for as my analytical tool. So the case studies that I ended up putting in the PhD, I actually had published before the PhD, and most of these took about 18 months to develop because I'd go to a conference, present a paper, come back, reflect, send it to a journal, and then you all know the process. So it wasn't quick, and I always had something that I had parallel things going on at the same time. So between teaching and writing papers, by the time I finished my PhD, I was absolutely exhausted, like most of you will be. But just going back to the, I've used to put a descriptive sentence for each of those publications. You can read in blue what the titles were, and you'll see that values education really permeates a lot of my work because I believe that that's foundational for understanding your social practices and so on. So the special needs, we've got a policy of inclusion in Western Australia. That was one paper that I wrote. And I had two children, one that didn't speak any words at all, and another that had very, very limited language. And those children were included in everything that we did. And they had to go to an ed support unit, and I went to the teacher and asked her, could those children come back and be a part of the social practices and any of the activities that were related, like making the teepee that you saw in the, that was a whole term's work. The second one is changing students' interactions to adopt pro-social values. So that was the bullying class. Really interesting kids in that class and great changes that happened over the year. The next one, motivation and action in collaborative primary classroom. And that really was about my motivation, what I explained at the beginning, and about the children's motivation. Because I was empowering them to be partners in solving problems in the classroom, resolving their issues. They had ownership. They had commitment because it was something that they really wanted to talk about, and they took personal and collective responsibility for their behaviour. They all supported each other. It was absolutely fabulous. And this is the sort of thing that keeps me really excited about teaching. And when I have students in my class, it's exactly the same experience for them once they understand what's going on. And the fourth one, I have lots of examples of collaborative leadership, student opportunities and how it changed the children, the students at educational risk, the students that were talented and gifted but didn't think they could mix with their peers because they felt superior, and their peers couldn't possibly have a conversation with them because they just knew it all. I had kids like that at the school. It was absolutely incredible, the attitudes and values that they held about their learning. That was the second school. The other school was nothing like that. So for me, again, this is not relating really to what you're going to be talking about, so I'll keep moving. But if you just want to have a quick look there, again, just reiterating the values. Classroom meetings that happened every week were a forum to express current issues, offer solutions, and act or request action from peers and the teacher, empowering all participants. And I just put a quote in there from Senko, which I've only started reading her work last year, and I just absolutely love it. Mm-hmm. It resonates really well with me. But I like the idea of the opportunities to contribute because that fits in with my philosophy too. The reflection logs were a deep reflective tool that I got heaps of information and clues about what the children were thinking. And the explicit social practices, I believe, supported students' social and emotional development. That's what I've written about since the PhD, my last 3 papers. And I had so much to say about it. I could get 3 papers, and I most would get more. So that's just those titles. And I won't go through it because it's not really about that. But I have published in Learning, Culture and Social Interaction, which I think is a great journal for this group. And I was so pleased because I didn't think I was intellectual enough to be able to get in. And I would love to get more papers in those sorts of journals, and that's why I've come here to really up my theoretical base about Vygotsky. And you'll see another thing that goes through there, not only social and emotional needs, but whole class scaffolding, which is what I want to talk to you about. So rather than looking at these slides, this will all be available for you. I've got 3 questions I'd like you to very quickly, 5 minutes, just talk about in groups, 3 groups. You can put yourself into groups. So the first question I want you to consider for me is, can I use the ZPD, zone of proximal development, Oh, thank you, thank you. As an extended tool to examine whole class scaffolding within the collective ZBT and be true to Vygotsky. And I'd like Nikolai to supervise that one for me. So there's a pen. And what I'd like you to do is just, if you don't want to use this framework, you don't have to, but just the yeses, the good things, the things that I think crazy about, that I've missed out on, and any other ideas. And useful references. So that's number one, Nikolai. So Nikolai is going to have 2, 4, 6, 8. So you can either just bunch around and a few can go in here. I'm going to take me a pen too. So that's number one.
Nikolai.
I'm really excited about what you're going to say because I've written 3 papers on them. I haven't accepted the publication. Can I combine the tool of drama to analyse events in my data? My classroom meetings are full of drama, and when I never thought about that concept till I came here, and I thought I could rewrite my PhD, but I'm not going to. So I would like, would you like to do that one for me, please, Victoria? So maybe 2, 4, 6, 8, we will quickly go with Victoria.
What's the joint?
Yes, so if this one will come up. And then the last question. Because I'm a classroom teacher and I interact with a lot of teachers all the time, who just think I'm crazy coming to Moscow. Why on earth would you want to spend a week of your holiday and your money coming here to talk about Vygotsky? You don't have the same passion. But I really need implications for classroom teachers about this sort of work. And I don't know whether I've asked the question correctly. I wrote this at 5 o'clock this morning. And I was very tired after the bowling. Yes, so you can take that one more side. But you know.
Okay, come, go.
Two more minutes.
No,
I've been told that. Maybe if I leave them outside and people want to add more later, that might be an idea.
That's okay.
Yeah. I've been told she could have lunch.
So, the class is the subject
or the
subject of activity we can use. If the class is the subject of activity, we can use this. But
for example, doing the social problem, there is
because
actual that he can do actual without any
I agree, because there is a collective activity and the whole class might be the subject of this collective activity. It's not the individual subject, this is a collective subject, because collective activity presupposes collective subject. Every activity is activity of somebody. Collective activity is activity of some collective subject. And the class, the group of children might be a collective subject, but only if they create the activity together. They are creating the activity together, distributing activity, and therefore they are becoming the subject of their collective activity, which is called collective subject. This is the logic. But scaffolding is a teacher individually supports children or the group of children by providing kind of but it's to support learning. It's to make a learning a little bit easier. So it means to follow the child. But ZBD is not to follow the child. ZBD is create the conditions for the child, cooperating with the child. We are creating the...
Right, we do have to stop. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
no ideas.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have orders. Can we just elect one person, and it doesn't have to be people that, one person in your group to report back to everybody, so just choose whatever you got up to.
It becomes clear if we give them the task. It becomes very clear. Are they okay in cooperation to find a solution or not? So you just give them different types of tasks, and they try this. Okay, oh yeah, this is the problem. And then you come and create a common activity. So this activity they develop individually. So from social to individual. The only way to develop it. Okay, mind is socially constructed.
Nicola, can you Can you pick somebody from the group, or you can speak? I don't mind. That's a really important
No,
one
we are
for me.
discussing. We are
Yeah,
discussing.
the
Look.
time is up. I've been told we've got to have lunch in 3 minutes. So
2011.
can you pick somebody from
And
the
collective
group?
subject.
We'll start with you and then here.
Okay. Do. Yeah.
So in my rush, I must we didn't explain that I'm really asking you to reflect back on social cultural historical theory for these questions.
Should
So
I?
yes, please. So
Okay.
maybe somebody can hold while you collaborate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the result of our
Yes.
dialogue, collective activity, and so on.
You've got
The
30
question was
seconds.
that can I use ZPD as an extended tool of the examined whole class scaffolding, the collective ZPD and the through Vygotsky. So we see several questions.
Yes.
You are
I
so
know.
well. So what we started from this, ZPD is not scaffolding.
Yes.
Scaffolding is not ZPD.
Yes.
They are different because ZPD is about development. Scaffolding is about learning.
Can I just make a comment about that? With the ZPD, the reason it was combined with that is because of the teaching that I was doing. But the ZPD, when it's conceptualised, it's about the students developing socially from all those social activities, particularly classroom meetings, and the case studies report changes in participation and development.
Yeah, but this is the important distinction because
Yeah.
even now many people mix this. They don't see the difference. They see this as a synonym, but they are
Yes.
actually now not a
Yeah.
synonym. But it's not about words. It's about conceptual differences.
Yes. Yeah.
Because of when you scaffold, you follow the child. You support the child's learning.
Yeah.
Child goes first, you follow the child and support the child to grow. ZPD is you create the zone of optimal development for the child. So you're creating the development conditions which is ahead of learning.
So I'm
Yeah.
talking
Okay.
collective.
So, plus, if the class is the subject of activity, we can use ZPD.
Yeah.
If the class is the subject of activity, we can use ZPD. Okay? Okay, then idea. What can be this collective activity?
Yeah.
What can be this subject of collective activity, which is not an individual subject or individual, a collective subject? What are the characteristics of the collective activity, and what are the characteristics of the subject of the collective activity? And that's the, and of course we know the answer because there is a book by Lektorsky about collective subject of collective activity. Well, idea. Oh yeah, okay. So, and what can the teacher do to create the collective activity and a collective subject of the collective activity? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much for that. You made me very happy. Right now, this one, really quickly about drama. This is my new thoughts from here.
About drama, we said thank you. We said yes, but try to be careful that it is the drama that leads to development.
Yeah.
We said yes, but the drama must be a concept within the cultural historical framework, and drama can be part of the ZPD as the drama problematizes the problem. And then we only got up to here, minuses use drama within the theoretical framework.
If I leave them outside, will you add to them? If you've got an idea that you haven't had time to write down, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Right, this group.
The last one is ideas. Just to get the pre-service stages to experience themselves what it means to be collaborative. One of the ideas. And then the other one is a collaboration experience and discover their own ZBD first. And minus is of course time and payment, because they want to be willing to do this inside their time while they're working for ISCAR. They were not going to do this outside the time. As a social culture and how, what is the last one?
How to deal with contradictions.
Yeah, would like to know that?
Within the school culture, because it's not a tradition in within Western teaching training programs to deal with contradictions, to make visible the contradictions. Yeah. They are afraid of it, and that could be a big challenge. How to deal with contradictions, to give the pre-teachers some tools that they discover how to deal with it
what I say to pre-service teachers is that I started from there, you know, and I've come to here, but it's taken many years and decades. But unless you engage in this stuff, you don't get there. If you ignore it, all the copies are going to stay there, and you know, you lose potential to create something meaningful. I'd just like to thank everybody for your participation. I really appreciate it. I think I'll hand over to Olga.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation.